All right, we have more changes unfolding in global energy markets and in the world of geopolitics. Changes that have a major investment bank now warning their clients of the possibility of $250 a barrel oil should this conflict continue escalating. As Iran just called for an oil embargo against the state of Israel, and as President Biden arrives to the Middle East, planning to hold a summit with Arab leaders today on Wednesday, well, that meeting, folks, was frantically canceled by the White House as it appears anger continues to grow in the Arab world, focused squarely at Israel and the U.S. after the Gaza hospital bombing. Well, we'll look at what this means for markets and for yields, as a lot more is happening than meets the eye. U.S. military assets, for instance, a lot of them have been deployed to Israeli waters, some of which tells a much larger story. A story that involved far more than simply a medical and advisory support mission like the government is saying. But before we get started, press the like button and consider subscribing. It helps the channel out, and I appreciate your support. So mission creep, folks. Is that what we're seeing here? Well, not according to our government. The public is being told that all of these military assets, including multiple submarines that are part of the carrier strike groups, are only to show solidarity with Israel and provide medical and advisory support if needed. Basically, the official story. And what many believe is that this is just like power projection posturing, deterrence, to hopefully deter any other actors from taking advantage of the chaos and attacking Israel. But we all know that there's more going on. There always is. One question that I've been wondering, is why no legitimate diplomatic efforts are being pushed by the U.S. So far, all we really have is just unwavering support for Israel's seek and destroy mission, which is odd because if you look back to previous conflicts, even during the Obama administration, for instance, we always tried to stay neutral. Even if the U.S. was biased toward Israel, we would try to give the impression of neutrality for mediation purposes, and Biden administration is just an extension of the Obama administration. So it's just odd that they're taking two different tacks here. Well, right now, that's not happening. We're giving what appears to be a green light to Israel. And when you look at it from that vantage point and then look at the military assets that we're sending over, it begs the question, what the hell is happening here? So this is from the site Moon of Alabama. Take a look at this. They write, U.S. deploys large force, eyes on Syria. The U.S. has recently moved way too many troops to the Middle East to be of peaceful purpose or to simply deter others from action. Who does it intend to fight? This is an excerpt from an Israeli newspaper article that says this. Last week, the United States deployed the aircraft carrier Gerald R. Ford and strike group to the eastern Mediterranean. The USS Ford carries about 80 combat aircraft, electronic warfare, and intelligence planes. It is accompanied by 5 advanced missile-guided ships armed with Tomahawk cruise missiles capable of hitting targets inside Iran. According to satellite images, the USS Ford is about 180 kilometers southwest of Cyprus. P-8 maritime reconnaissance aircraft with anti-submarine and anti-ship capabilities are also patrolling around the group. Over the weekend, a second carrier strike group led by the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower was dispatched to the eastern Mediterranean and is due to arrive later this month. Now, they go on and write this. Each carrier strike group also includes 1 or 2 submarines. Next to various support planes, each carrier has a wing of fighter planes consisting of 4 squadrons with 12 fighter jets each. And there's more, folks, a lot more where that came from. I'm not going to read all of it, but take a listen to this part. According to multiple U.S. defense officials, the Bataan Amphibious Ready Group, consisting of the USS Bataan and USS Carter Hall, as well as roughly 2,500 Marines with the 26th Marine Expeditionary Unit, are now en route toward the eastern Mediterranean from the Arabian Sea, where she will link back up with the USS Mesa Verde, who has finished her mid-deployment repair period in Spain early and is already steaming across the Mediterranean. So what they're getting at is the goal of all of these assets, specifically this Amphibious Ready Group, which is a unit that includes both Navy sailors and Marines, but are trained for special operations and wouldn't normally be sent for medical and advisory missions, but instead, are a fighting force, basically. So who are they fighting? Well, they go on to give a theory. And again, this is just a theory, all right, saying that Hamas isn't the target and that Iran also is too difficult to attack, and why they believe that the real aim of this buildup is finally regime change in Syria and to kick out the Russian forces who were there to support its government. Writing this, the recent Israeli bombing attacks on the airports of Aleppo and Damascus, disabling both of them, point in this direction. The neoconservative lunatics in the White House may well think that they now have a chance to eliminate Russia's presence in the Middle East. Now, this comes at the same time that reports are beginning to leak out that the Ukraine war is coming to an end. Now, do we know that for sure? No, we don't. But there's been these rumblings that financial support for Ukraine is running out. And with Jim Jordan, the likely next Speaker of the House, a Republican, who's vowed to not support any additional Ukraine military funding without strict conditions, Moon of Alabama writes this: they will think of this as a revenge for their loss of the war in Ukraine. They also believe that it will prevent or compensate for their geopolitical defeat in Gaza. Russia is undoubtedly prepared for that. Still, its contingent in Syria is just too small. A combined attack by all U.S. forces in the area, more than 150 airplanes, would certainly defeat it. Now, again, that's obviously a theory, not fact. One thing's for sure, though, the story that the public is told is never what's really happening. There's always layers and layers of goals and objectives by state actors whenever social unrest and upheaval breaks out somewhere. Now, in the midst of this, though, a major investment bank updated their price forecast for the price per barrel of oil. This is a note published this morning by Goldman Sachs titled, "Liquid gas can float and fly, so can oil." Writing this, what does Middle East turmoil mean for oil and gas? The concept of energy fragility quickly brings to mind the current turmoil in the Middle East. Yet Israeli-Palestinian conflicts post-1973 have had a limited impact on energy prices because they were mostly contained. So the key question for energy is whether that the conflict broadens regionally or not. If it does, oil prices could climb above $130 a barrel on the risk of a Persian Gulf shutdown. If shipments through Hormuz, a choke point for nearly 20% of the world's oil, and LNG were to shut down for a meaningful period, oil could spike above $250 a barrel and LNG may surpass $50. But even if the conflict does not broaden, the U.S. may enforce Iranian oil sanctions, curbing global oil supply in 2024, likely pushing Brent prices above $100 a barrel and LNG above $20. So we have two major catalysts, folks, to watch for. A Persian Gulf shutdown, which Goldman says would cause oil prices to jump above $130 a barrel. And second, if shipments through the Strait of Hormuz are shut down or interrupted, oil, they say, spikes to over $250 a barrel. So according to Goldman Sachs, which would be completely destabilizing. Now, a worst case scenario is if the war just continues spreading even further. We'll table that just for the moment. Now, don't think that either of these cases is that far-fetched. Think about it in terms of probabilities, right? What's the likely probability that either of these options occur? Even if it's a small chance, it's worth considering and is likely why we just saw the Biden administration announce a new deal with Venezuela yesterday to lift oil sanctions, covering their bases clearly for either what we just discussed or a last-ditch effort to shore up oil supply before the next election. So let me get this straight. There's now two hot wars raging in two different parts of the world, both of which include U.S. proxies. The Middle East is getting ready to erupt. We're now getting to the point that we're desperate enough to cut a deal with Venezuela. And on top of that, U.S. crude oil reserves are at their lowest levels in 40 years. What you can see on this chart, this is total barrels we have in reserve in the SPR, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. In November 2021 is when Biden began the drawdown. We had 609 million barrels. Fast forward to today, we have 351 million barrels left as of October 6th. So does anyone else feel like everything's just imploding here? Alright, if you enjoyed this video, got something out of it, press the like button. If you didn't, that's alright too. Either way, I appreciate you watching.